Hi everyone, I'm Meredith, and listen, I'm just a girl stuck in my apartment looking for someone, well, anyone to talk to. So I found some people. My guest is Adam Feldman. Adam's the theater editor and critic at Timeout New York, and we're talking how covering theater has changed since it all went dark back in March because of the pandemic. But before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Let's Talk About It YouTube channel. I don't want you to miss any new videos or episodes as they come out. So go ahead, Adam and I will wait. Did you do it? Great. Adam, thank you so much for being here. Let's talk about it.
Let's talk.
So we're talking the interminable, it feels like, Broadway Shutdown, and heartbreaking for me, I'm sure for you as well. Take me back to when it all began. March 12th, I believe, was the date.
It was March 12th. It was the date that the musical Six was supposed to open.
Mm-hmm.
So I was preparing a review for that show. They ended up asking us to hold those reviews. I also was going to see a show that night. I was going to see The Minutes on Broadway, the new Tracy Letts play. And so it was a very busy time of year. And it's funny because it's always so busy, as you know, in March and April of every season. And we always complain every year about how much there is to see and sort of what a silly thing it is historically that the Broadway season tends to be packed so densely into those last few weeks of the season because everyone wants to open in time to be eligible for the Tony Awards and still be on the top of voters' minds and the rest of it. So this year, that was it turned out especially damaging because even though we only lost about 6 weeks total out of the 52-week, theoretically 52-week season, we lost roughly half of all the Broadway productions from the season in terms of Tony Awards eligibility. So that's that was a blow at the time. And we didn't really know what it was going to be. I think it all happened so fast. We knew that there were intimations that there might be restrictions on group gatherings. There was certainly talk about that. There was talk that it might come down at some point soon. And then it all came crashing down very, very fast. And it was announced on Thursday. Everything was closed by Thursday on the Broadway level. And then just minute by minute, the emails came pouring in of various off-Broadway and then off-Broadway shows that were closing as well. There were still a few stragglers in that first weekend that were not officially prohibited from having public performances in smaller theaters, and there were a few of them that continued to have performances. I was going to go to one on Friday of that week. I ended up canceling at the last minute, but after that week, it was all shut, and it remains so today. Yeah.
On that date, just had you finished the review for Six? When?
No, I was crunching out that review, and it was.
Does it remain unfinished at the moment?
It remains unfinished, which is fine because there would be no way to write, to run that review anymore anyway.
Right.
When Broadway reopens, and I do think it is a when. It's just a question of when that when will be. When Broadway reopens, if Six is among the shows that reopens with it at some point, then of course I will see it again and I will write about it then. So yes, it saved me the labor of finishing one review, but I would of course gladly trade that 1,000 times.
Of course. When were you shocked when the news came down? I mean, there were starting to be rumblings, but I didn't see it coming.
I was somewhat shocked. I mean, there had been talk about it, and so I had a feeling it might be coming at some point, but it was a shock how quickly it happened. And of course, that shock was mitigated by a couple of things. One is that we had again, there had been talk about it happening, and even though a lot of people were sort of like, no, it's not going to happen, there was still, there was some prep time to get our heads a little bit around the idea. Also, when they announced it, they basically just sort of, it was indefinite, it was indefinite in what seemed like a potentially limited way. So it seemed like, we're going to suspend shows for a month was the initial messaging. And then that kept getting extended and extended and extended. If they had said at the very beginning, we're closing now on March 12th and we will be closed until September of 2021 at the least, then I think it would have been an even more catastrophic shock. Although in some ways, maybe it would have prepared us for some of the future disappointments that were in store.
How did you handle that initial coverage? Everything went in that when went into how you would pivot all of your coverage plans for that point of the season and what you would be writing about going forward, because it wasn't going to be shows, opening shows, rehearsing shows, uh, closing new reviews. How did all of the coverage plans change?
Well, they all changed quite dramatically. Ordinarily, around that time of year, almost all of the coverage that we would be doing would be covering the huge number of new shows that would be opening during that period, and reviewing them myself or assigning them and editing reviews of them myself. And then immediately after that, we would ordinarily have the Tony Award nominations, and there would be a month of run up for that, and that month would basically be covered with that sort of thing. So that was a huge chunk of time that was just torn out like a carpet from under those of us who write about this stuff. Um, my reaction, I mean, I was in the office that day. We all went home, and we didn't know, what the immediate plan would be for going back to the office. As it turned out, I wouldn't be in the office again until late September. So
Do you go back now? Have you been?
yes, we can go back now. Actually, that's not true. I went back on Friday of that week. I went back the next day, and before they were prohibited, and I picked up some things some reference books and some notes and copies of electronic files and things like that I might need from home if I had to work from there, as I suspected I would, and as it turned out, I did. We have reopened the office on a limited basis, and people are able to go in there and work. We have a system in place where you reserve spots there to make sure that there aren't too many people there at once, and then you also take your temperature when you're there, and you send that into the HR department, and it's all very carefully tracked right now. But I've gone in twice since the office reopened, or 3 times since the office reopened in late September, and sometimes it's good to just get out of my apartment. I'm in my apartment a lot, and sometimes I'll want to pick something up, or in one case they reorganized our desk setup so that we wouldn't be close to each other. So I needed to go in to see to that. But for the most part, I've been working from home. And to answer your first question
Yeah.
more completely, I pivoted almost immediately to covering online events. And for a while, I was one of the only people writing about that stuff. And I was doing a daily list at that time of virtual theater offerings. Some of them were the beginnings of Zoom theater type readings, or live readings of plays or live conversations. And others were archival streams of videos that had been taken of live performances. And there's still a mix of that in what we'd call a streaming theater today. And I still do cover it, and that still makes up a huge part of what my job is now, which is to continue to do basically what I was doing before. Try to connect audiences with artists, try to give audiences the information they need to find work that's still available to them, that has theatrical dimensions, and try to give theater artists access to audiences that are looking for such work. So, but I will say, for the first few months, I was doing this. It was brand new. It was very disorganized on everyone's part, and no one knew how to put this up. No one knew how to get the word out about it. No one had photographs. No one had press releases. So digging up all this stuff, creating a platform for it on our site, which had not been built for that particular purpose, required an enormous amount of work. And I was literally working, and this is not an exaggeration, I was working 14, 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for 3 months for the first part of this pandemic. I barely remember any of it, because all I did was work. I would get up, I would work from 10 in the morning to 3 in the morning, and then I'd go to sleep, and then I would do it again the next day. And everything that I had done the day before would be wiped clean on the page that I work on. So it was bizarre, Groundhog Day kind of life. And that was unsustainable. So we moved to a 3 times a week schedule, and eventually to the current once a week schedule, which still lists dozens and dozens of shows, but does it on a weekly page now, which is a little better for people to be able to plan in advance if they want to see what's happening in the week ahead and mark out their schedules. Because the on the daily thing, although it was handy if you were looking for something to watch right now, it wasn't great if you were trying to plan out a week.
Right.
As people have gotten into their more or less something closer to their prior lives, they've gotten a bit more into a theater scheduling idea where you're not going to be just stuck at home looking for something to watch every day. You're going to be making decisions about what theater you most want to see.
Sure, sure. And as that normaled out for you, and making that schedule right normaled out to some degree, it sounds like. How else did you continue to cover new theater in New York when physically there has been no theater in New York, right?
Right. Well, there has been some physical theater in New York, and there have been little patches of it. Of course, it has to be done in a very careful way and also in a very limited way. So we've seen some theater, some live theater and live music performance in outdoor situations, or in half and half outdoor indoor situations where there are piano bars now, for example, where the
Right.
audience is seated on patios, but the piano is sort of close to the window, and you can hear or is outside on the street, and you sort of have a little bit of both. There are also kind of interactive tour kind of things, or solo shows that are done in large spaces where they can space people out, and things like that. But relatively few of them, yes, and on a quite small scale. So when we're talking about large scale theater, what we're really talking about is, for better or for worse, theater that is streamed online, and there are many different kinds of it. As I suggested before, there are two basic categories of it, which is pre-recorded material from the before times,
Right.
and new material, and that new material can be either pre-recorded or live. Um, but that has a theater component. So either the liveness, or the fact that it's a text that was written for the theater, or that it is using theater actors. There are different ways in which virtual theater can be uh, theater adjacent in certain ways, even though it is not the experience of being a live body in front of other live bodies or events.
Mhm. The theater coverage industry, reporters, critics, have taken a major hit. You are, I would assume, feeling very lucky to still have your position at timeout, but many
Right.
of your colleagues, along not in addition to the performer and creative industry of the theater, have been massively hurt by the pandemic.
Yeah, it has been brutal, and I will say that it was already a very difficult time for journalists generally, and for arts journalists in particular, in the decade leading up to this, because of various changes in the way that sort of media structures work. Um, so a lot of my colleagues had already lost their jobs before this pandemic, and this has certainly accelerated and exacerbated that problem. Um, so yes, I do feel very lucky to still have a job at Timeout. I hope I will continue to have one. It is very difficult to sustain an audience, and to sustain a profitability, um, which comes from having an audience, and which comes from having an advertiser base built around an industry that right now can't sell anything. So so I hope that they will keep me on. But yes, I think that's a good point to keep in mind. I think as a lot of people are mobilizing around people in the theater industry, as well they should, to try to sustain them throughout this, what we hope will be a limited pause in operations. But to the extent that it matters to people, people should also keep other theater adjacent worlds in mind. That includes things like restaurants that are near theaters and that depend on theater business, restaurants that they may love and that they are not thinking of necessarily, but if they have the opportunity to go there, and help them ride out this time, that would be a good time to do it. And another one is theater media. I work really hard, for example, on these weekly virtual theater lists. The more people visit them, the better. And not just those lists, but also articles I write in addition to these lists of shows that people can see. I write feature articles and share them on social media. And uh, I would certainly, the more people see them, the better. The better for me, better for Timeout, the better for the artists that we're profiling, the better for everyone to keep this conversation alive as much as we can.
Absolutely. Was it a little bit more than a week ago? Something happened in the yearly theater season that comes every year, but just in a very different way. This year we had, at long last, Tony Award nominations.
Right.
But in an extremely different way. We don't yet know when the Tony Awards are going to be held, I believe. At least I don't.
Nope.
And nominations came in, I think weird has been just a general feeling, but thankfully they've come. What coverage for normally in a season, right? Late April through June would be just laser focused on that for you. Now it's here. What is the coverage around the awards been like?
Well, I wrote a number of analysis pieces before the nominations came out, talking about the various challenges that the awards were facing this year, and wondering about how they might address some of the open questions at that time about eligibility and so forth. I did some explainer posts about the rules of the Tony Awards for nominations and about the changes that they had instituted this year to those rules. So that was great fun to do, frankly. It's in my wheelhouse, and it's something that I had missed, and it felt useful at that moment. Now the nominations have come out. It's a little tricky because and I think the nominees themselves are acutely aware of this, but it's hard to whip up the same celebratory frenzy around it when we're all, where we are.
Yeah.
So and the I think a lot of people there's two reasons. There's more than two reasons, but there are a number of reasons for that. Partly it just feels weird to be going Yahoo at a time when so many people are struggling so much. Partly it's that the season itself was only half of a season, and so everything feels a little bit, especially for the musicals this year, where there were only 4 productions that were eligible out of what was to have been 13 shows that would have been eligible in the musical categories. So that is a really strongly reduced year, as opposed to the plays, which are much less affected. Many of them had opened and many closed already earlier in the season and the fall part of the season. So for that, it's just, inevitably there's an asterisk next to the nominations this year. That said, Tony Awards, and I made this point when I was responding to the nominations in a piece that I wrote about it, but the also truth is that there are always some years that are stronger than others. And we've had years in the past where there have been comparable slates of competitors in full seasons.
But I would think never before one where there was only one Best Actor nominee for a musical.
Well, sure. I mean, actually, in 1985, they eliminated the categories of Best Actor and Actress in a Musical entirely. There were no.
So there were none there, but there wasn't one.
There wasn't one, but there was less than one. There were none. There were 0.
The history is interesting, right?
Right. And sometimes that happens. In 1989, they it was a year of a couple of big reviews and a bunch of really very weak book musicals, and they eliminated the categories of Best Book and Best Score.
And we're still here.
And we're
But
still here. In 1995, for when Sunset Boulevard won, that was the only nominee. That was a one category nominee. I mean, one nominee category. And they gave best score and best book to Sunset Boulevard. Um, but so yeah, it does happen. You don't want it to happen, of course, but it's not like it is truly unprecedented. We tend to focus, when we nostalgize Broadway's past, we tend to focus on really great years, and we tend to forget that there are also, there's an ebb and flow every year anyway, and there are years that are stronger than others all the time. You look at 1960 and you say, wow, I can't believe Gypsy lost Best Musical to a tie between The Sound of Music and Fiorello. And the other nominee that year was Once Upon a Mattress. What a great year, what Broadway used to be. Yeah, sure, that's 1960. And then you look at 1959, and Best Musical that year was Redhead, and no one's ever heard of it since. So, it really, I think that one thing you can say is that we do have a lot of nominees this year who would have been nominated anyway for the excellent work that they did in the productions that did manage to open this season and managed to be eligible. And it is worth celebrating, I think, and it will be a nice. We'll see how everyone feels after next week, after whatever happens next week. But we may or may not feel like we are in a more celebratory, hopeful place, and hopefully
or
the Tony
people will
Awards.
need reasons to celebrate.
Yeah, or we'll need reasons to celebrate. And so the Tony Awards, whenever they are in December, um, probably in December, will give us at least some occasion to revisit some of the best work and celebrate some of the best work this season.
Absolutely. And last question, I would imagine, unfortunately, now we have to wait for theater to come back until next summer, June, correct? And initially we thought a month,
At least June.
at least June. We thought it a month, then we thought early 2021. Now it's at least June. I would imagine a lot of the coverage going forward till then will be how theater comes back, how it safely comes back, and what's it going to look like when it does.
Yes, so right, and we're working on some pieces. I'm working on some pieces along those lines now. But part of the problem is that it's very hard to write those kinds of pieces because so much of it is so speculative. We don't know when Broadway or off-Broadway or other large gathering situations will return. Broadway has currently officially shut down until the end of May, but many other large arts institutions have already cut all their programming through September, including, say, the Metropolitan Opera and New York City Ballet, and many others. So we say June now. That may very well not be the case. It will depend in large part on the course of the pandemic and whether we can get usable and effective vaccines. Because if we don't, then there will not be, I don't think, a way for 1,000 people, many of them older, to assemble in a space that was built 100 years ago. It's just not. It's not in the cards right now. So we really have to hope and rely upon the hope that there will be medical technologies that will make that possible. But we don't know what those will be. Everybody obviously is trying to make those as fast as they can, but we can't. I think the questions will be at that time, depending on the efficacy of the vaccines and how they work. The questions will be how, let's assume a perfect vaccine, a 100% efficacy vaccine. Let's imagine that. Then the question becomes, how do you get people back in, and how do you get people back into the sort of patterns and habits and theater going rituals that they are out of touch with. And I think that there will be a lot of people who will be very excited to go back if and when they are able to. And I do think, again, it is a when, but the when has a lot of ifs in it.
Absolutely. Well, until then, We will stay tuned. We will follow you, Adam, for all the latest.
Yeah.
And we will
go to Timeout Theater. Our theater page is very easy to access. You know, it will have our latest coverage, including all the best virtual theater stuff. It's just timeout.com/theater. Just the word theater with an ER at the end, not an RE. So the American spelling of theater. But yeah, timeout.com/theater. And that will give you not only a quite comprehensive list of the best virtual theater that you can catch in a given week, but also news about other developments in the theater scene.
All right, that's it. So in the meantime, everyone, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Let's Talk About It Theater channel so you don't miss Adam's episode and all new shows and video. Adam, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate all the information and the good chat.
Thank you for having me.
We'll talk to you next time. This has been Let's Talk About It.